Men of sense, whatever you may choose to say, do not want silly wives. Really though? Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today we are in the office part of the library, and that's because we are going to do something that was a trend on YouTube about 1.5 years ago. It's about time, or slightly too late, to do one myself. Today I will be ranking Jane Austen's romances, Jane Austen's couples, in order of how much I like them. But before I get into the actual ranking, I need to give you a big fat spoiler warning for Jane Austen's 6 main novels. I will be spoilering all of them because I'm going to be talking about the romances, some of which are pretty big plot points. So if you've not yet read all of Jane Austen's novels, do that instead of watching this video. If you're interested in Jane Austen content in general, do have a little look in my description box and check out the playlist that I have been making for Jane Austen July content. This year's playlist already has a few videos in it. But now, let's get into the romances and see which ones I think deserve top tier. Couples I've included are couples that get together during the book and stay together by the end of it. So if there's an engagement that's broken off within the novel, that doesn't count. Divorce doesn't count. Only couples that get together during the book and remain together by the end of it. So here we have our couples along the bottom. Most of these are pictures from the films, and I have just realized something that's going to make this quite difficult. I have prosopagnosia, which, if you're familiar with my channel, you'll know it basically means I can't tell faces apart, and that all of these couples look the same. So if I accidentally drag the wrong picture, if I say this is Catherine Morland but it's actually Anne Elliot, just ignore it, just forgive me. So let's quickly go through the tiers. Our top tier is of course loveliness itself. This is reserved for the couples who I wish a long and happy life together, who I think are going to do amazing even after the book's finished, and who I also enjoyed very much in the books. Next down we have Happy Thought Indeed. I think that's self-explanatory. I think these are romances that are wonderful parts of the book, that are lovely to read about and that make me happy. Just below that we have Tolerable, I suppose, which is the tier reserved for those couples where I don't think that they make the perfect match, but that are probably going to work out and that I thought were okay in the novels. Just below that is My Poor Nerves. This is the tier reserved for romances that I don't think should have happened like that have a lot to improve, and where I don't think the characters will be all that happy with each other. And then right at the bottom, the lowest tier is The Last Man in the World Whom I Could Ever Be Prevailed On to Marry, and that is for couples who really should not have happened. Full stop. So let's start here on the left, and I believe this is Anne Elliot and Captain Wentworth, which I think are a great couple. I really enjoy their romance. I think that the letter from Captain Wentworth at the end of Persuasion is the single most romantic scene in Jane Austen's works. But I don't personally warm to Anne Elliot as much as I know other readers do, although Captain Wentworth, I'll just leave it at that. I think they go in Happy Thought Indeed, because after waiting 7 years and dancing around each other for a whole novel's worth of plot, I think they're going to be wonderfully happy together. I enjoyed reading about them in Persuasion. Right, this is a couple that I'm not entirely sure about, but I think this is Catherine Morland and Henry Tilney. We're just going to assume this is Catherine Morland and Henry Tilney. This is a tricky one because I love Henry Tilney. He's actually my favorite Austen hero. He is so funny and witty and he loves books. What more can you ask in a man? And he is just a great guy, you know, he seems nice, he seems lovely. Catherine Morland is a teenager. There is clearly a bit of a difference in maturity level between the two of them, but I think that they could work really well together. Basically, I can see a lot of what she sees in him. I can't see a lot of what he sees in her. But I still really like the two of them, so they are going in happy thought indeed. Next up, and there is no chance of me mistaking those two faces, this is Charlotte Lucas and Mr. Collins, the unfortunate Charlotte Lucas, as I always think of her. She is such a complex and fascinating character. He is very well written comic relief, but she made the choice with her eyes wide open. She knew exactly what she was getting into with this marriage, and therefore I cannot put them in my poor nerves or the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry. Although Mr. Collins is likely very close to the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry. So, purely on the strength of the character of Charlotte Lucas and her ability to see beyond the romance part of a marriage during her time, I think they go intolerable, I suppose. Next up, oh no, this the software has just straight up cut off Edward Ferras's face. But here we have Elinor Dashwood and Edward Ferrars. The romances in Sense and Sensibility, I'm just going to say it now, are among my least favourite. I like Elinor Dashwood as a character, but Edward Ferrars does not deserve her. He behaves like a total asshole throughout the entirety of Sense and Sensibility. He cannot stand up for himself. He's getting kicked about by his relatives left, right and centre, not to mention Lucy Steele. And he simply isn't good enough for her. I really wanted better for poor Elinor Dashwood. She deserves a man on her level. So they are going in my poor nerves. Here we have the most iconic couple, and that is Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. They are also very complex in terms of their relationship. And I have read many opinions that say that Mr. Darcy really should not be admired as a hero, because he too is pretty insufferable in most of Pride and Prejudice. But unlike Edward Ferrars, I truly believe he redeems himself by the end, and I really think that him and Elizabeth Bennet are perfectly well matched, and therefore we have our first couple in the loveliness itself tier. Emma Woodhouse and George Knightley. I think there's a lot to be said both for and against them as a couple. The age difference we cannot ignore, but the romance in the book is excellent. There are many things I like about this couple. I like how Mr. Knightley is the only person that can truly get through to Emma when she is at her most brattish, at her most insufferable, and at her meanest. He is the only one who gets to her. And obviously throughout the book she doesn't always recognize that, but she always realizes that he's touching a nerve. And the other way around. George Knightley seems like a pretty cool dude, but Emma's antics really get to him as well. I really enjoyed all of the romance plots in Emma as a novel. The back and forth, the secrets, the misunderstandings, contrived as some of them are, make for a really fantastic reading experience. And you really wonder, at least the first time I read this, I really wondered who was going to get together with whom. And it wasn't entirely clear. So on both fronts, Emma and Mr. Knightley go in happy thought indeed. The couple from my least favourite Jane Austen book, Mansfield Park. Here we have Fanny Price and what's-his-face Edmund Bertram. I'm not a fan of Fanny Price as a character, but she deserves better than him. She deserves so much more than someone who completely ignores her for the majority of the book and who flirts with other women and who doesn't see her as a person until the very end of the novel, and not even the very end of the novel, because if you remember, Mansfield Park ends in this weird sort of epilogue that says, oh yes, years after the events of this book, the two got together and then they got married and they were all very happy. But if we take Edmund and Fanny as they are in Mansfield Park, I don't like them together. And I'm not saying she would have been happy with Henry Crawford, but at least he would bring some spice into her life. I'm sorry to all Mansfield Park fans. I'm sorry to all fans of Edmund Bertram. If you are a fan of Edmund Bertram, comment down below. No judging. But I am going to put those two in the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry. And that is on the merit of Edmund, not Fanny, because she, as a character, deserves happiness. Next up, another couple from Emma. And this is Emma's friend Harriet Smith and her eventual fiancé, Robert Martin. I was thinking, is it Mr. Robert or is it Mr. Martin? But it's Mr. Martin. He is the farmer who she had an attachment to at the beginning of the novel before Emma came in and ruined everything and set her up with every man in the novel until Harriet figured out for herself that no, she likes Mr. Martin and she doesn't mind marrying a farmer, especially since a farmer of Robert Martin's social standing and wealth was a perfectly respectable and very comfortable position. So I think the two of them are going to be very happy. I was rooting for them throughout Emma, and I am going to put them in happy thought indeed. Here we've got the first cat picture. So basically there were three couples who I couldn't find pictures from the films. There was somewhere I wasn't sure if it was actually them because of the face issue. So instead we've got some stand-in pictures of my cats. That's Minerva there, the black and white one, and Beadle the tabby. So let's just say this one stands for Julia Bertram and Mr. Yates, the most forgettable couple in all of Austen's work. Obviously the more interesting sister is Maria Bertram, but she's not in this list because she doesn't actually end up with her man by the end of the book. But her sister, Julia, does elope with Mr. Yates. So forgettable, I don't even care. There should be a tier for this. Let's put them in my poor nerves. Considering it was such a rushed decision, I don't think they're going to be particularly happy. Next we have Jane Bennet and Mr. Bingley from Pride and Prejudice. Jane Bennet, sweetness herself, always thinks the best of everyone. Mr. Bingley kind of doesn't have much of a personality. He's very happy, he likes her smiles, and he does everything Mr. Darcy and his own sister tell him. I know Jane loves him though, so I can't put them in the bottom two tiers, but I will put them in tolerable, I suppose. I wasn't particularly rooting for or against them in Pride and Prejudice. I guess there was a bit of an intrigue about why he dropped her so suddenly, and then it turns out that he is just kind of too weak to form his own opinion. I mean, okay, if that's what she's into. Next up, I think this is Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax from Emma. They are another favourite couple of mine in the books because their romance forms the basis of what I think is the most intriguing plotline in Emma, which is the secret around Jane Fairfax and the mystery around Frank Churchill. It's the most sort of mystery novel aspect of Emma, and I really enjoyed reading about that. So they get high marks for the plot points of the romance, but if I think about the character of Frank Churchill with his incessant flirting with Emma and knowing full well that he was engaged to another lady, but not just incessant flirting with Emma, but incessant flirting with Emma in full view of his fiancée. And yes, I get that they were trying to keep it a secret, but I really think that he was having way too much fun playing these women. And I feel a little bit sorry for Jane Fairfax. Only a little bit though, because obviously by marrying Frank Churchill, she escapes the profession of a governess, which she really wasn't that keen on. So I'm going to put them in tolerable, I suppose. Okay, who are these cats going to be? Oh, okay, I think these are the Musgrove sisters from Persuasion. So let's say on the left here we've got Louisa, no, which one? It's Henrietta Musgrove that ends up marrying Charles Hayter, super forgettable, not really a plot point. I'm not entirely sure why they're in here. I'll put them in tolerable, I suppose. And then next up, the slightly more interesting romance of the other Musgrove sister, Louisa, I'm gonna say. I might be wrong on this, but whatever. And Captain Benwick. It's said that by the end, she loses a little bit of her exuberance, and maybe Captain Benwick's romantic poetry is kind of calming it down. I think they're a decent enough match. I'll put them in tolerable, I suppose, as well. Next up, the iconic Lydia Bennet and the disreputable Mr. Wickham. We are not supposed to like Lydia Bennet in Pride and Prejudice, I think. She's very much written as a cautionary tale character. She's supposed to be an embarrassment to the family, just like Mrs. Bennet and Mary Bennet. I think with modern eyes, a lot of us feel a lot more sympathy for Lydia. She's 15, she's the youngest in a family of 5 sisters, and she loves to dance and she loves to flirt. And there's nothing wrong with that. If we look at their role in the plot of Pride and Prejudice, they are certainly an intriguing part, but I just cannot bring myself to give this poor, unhappy girl a higher ranking than... It's got to be in the bottom tier. The last one in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry. She's going to be absolutely miserable, and all because she is a bit of a flirt in a society where that is unacceptable. And that's not her fault. Who are these? We've got Marianne Dashwood and Colonel Brandon. A great character. I love how he's set up as this elderly man in his mid-30s with a past, a mysterious past, possibly even a lover and an extramarital child. There's a sense of mystery built around him. And then that's juxtaposed with the banality of how Marianne sees him as an old man who's probably got gout and who definitely does not fit her image of marriage material. I think this is the only couple where I think the man is too good for the woman. I have already said that I disliked both main romance plots in Sense and Sensibility, and this one I dislike even more than Ellen Dashwood's one. I think Colonel Brandon deserves an Eleanor, but that's not what he wanted. He wanted a Marianne, and he got a Marianne. It just, these two, I did not feel the chemistry between them in Sense and Sensibility, and therefore they're going in my poor nerves. Hashtag justice for Colonel Brandon. This final couple, they probably shouldn't really be in here because I can't really describe their marriage as a romance plot, but I like them so much that I had to put them in. We've got Mr. and Mrs. Elton from Emma. What can I say? They deserve each other. They're going to be so happy together. Happy thought indeed. They're either going to drive each other up the wall or they're going to be that couple that everyone hates. And they're probably going to be that couple that everyone hates. And they'll be happy about that. So there you go. This is my couples in Jane Austen tier list. I hope you enjoyed this silly little video. If you want more Jane Austen content, check out the description box. And I want to put a particular plug in for my hour-long, I know, game show video called Jane Austen Taskmistress, which takes the concept of the popular British TV show Taskmaster with a Jane Austen twist. Genuinely the best video I've ever made. And if you've not seen it yet, do check it out. The link will be in the description box. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!